And we are live. What's going on YouTube Live? It's your boy Billy Rowe. Today is Tuesday. I'd like to welcome you to the first row. If it is Tuesday, you should already know what day that means it is. It's time for a first row intersation. Tonight's guest is Antoine Wade of Black Heights. Now, normally I say the topic, but I really want to get this into your mind tonight. Antoine Wade of Black Heights. Tonight's topic is about applying feedback. You guys are in store for a wonderful, 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 wonderful show tonight. I feel like the energy is good for me. I've already talked to Antoine a little bit. The energy is good for him. So tonight I want you guys to be ready to take notes, be engaged in the live chat for those who are watching live. And if you get this video within the first week, if you engage in the comments, somebody will make sure that we respond to you in the comments as well. So with that all being said, I'd like to first give Antoine just a moment briefly to say hello to the people. Antoine, can you say hello to the people, please?
Hello, everyone out there. I hope you guys are in store and ready for a real good show tonight, man. Billy, thank you so much for having me on the platform, my man.
Oh, no worries, no worries. Actually, it's a welcome back because this is actually Antoine's second Intersation. Hopefully, we will be doing a couple more collaborations as the year goes on. But I think this is a very good Intersation, and I'm going to give my insights on that in a little bit. But before we get into that, for those who are new, I always like to explain what an Intersation is. So as simply put as possible, an Intersation is when you take an interview and a conversation, and when you merge the two together, you get what I call Intersation. It's a word I made up. But what Intersation is, fortunately for me in my life, I'm very privileged to have a very diverse network of friends, family, acquaintances, coworkers, maybe even some enemies out there. I don't know, but if you know a few of them, please let me know so I can watch my back. But I have a very diverse network of people that I know. And because I have this diverse network of people, I typically have conversations that typically go from the surface level and run deeper into more meaningful things that promote growth and inspire growth within each of us during the conversation. So Intersations was created as a way to open up a literal lens into those conversations so that not only I and the person speaking can experience some of the growth from the conversation, but you as the viewer also have the ability to engage with us, number one, but engage in that growth, number two. So though you will see tonight, you'll see Antoine and I speaking back and forth. You'll see our pictures on the video. Realize that this is not just a conversation for Antoine and I. This is a conversation for everybody who's on the live chat. If you have a question, feel free to jump in and ask it. If you have something you want to add, a nugget, a comment, feel free to jump in and add it. This is a conversation that is a group conversation. You just happen to only see two of the people. I already see we got people here in the live chat jumping in. We got Brian Sr., we got Mark Anthony, we got Selena, Elise, we got Tiffany Wade. Hi, Tiffany. That's your sister. See, I remember things.
That's right.
But I want to welcome you guys. Thank you for tuning in the live chat. Keep the live chat live so that way we have things to jump into in and out of our conversation. So with all that being said, again, tonight's topic is applying feedback. I want to give Antoine, for those who may not have been on the first Intersation, Antoine, I want to give you the opportunity to introduce yourself and a little bit why you came out and what you feel like is your contribution that you have to add to this conversation tonight.
Absolutely, Billy. So for the people who don't know me, I am Antoine Wade, the founder of Black Heights, and we are a management training and a leadership development company where we are, in our vision is to prepare African Americans for upward mobility in management and leadership positions around the world. And we do this by training, coaching, and providing exposure to top-level business professionals like myself and Billy and plenty of other people that we actually have on the channel. So I'm also a husband, a father to two kids, a son, and a friend to many, and an associate to others as well, too, man. Billy, thank you so much for having me back on Intersations. It's been a long time, my man. I know we speak often through text messages and stuff like that, but I came to this Intersation because applying feedback is something very important to me, and I've used it throughout my entire life for personal development. And I think I can contribute a little bit to the topic tonight, my man. That's why I'm here, brother.
All right. Well, no, I know you can. Or trust me, we wouldn't be having this conversation. I'm like, I don't think that this is the one for you. There's one for you, but I don't think this is the one for you. No, definitely. I'm honored that you're here tonight. I'm just honored that we have, in a very short time, been able to foster a very good friendship, I would consider at this point, that we're in the midst of establishing. And one of the things that really led me to have you on this is based on, I mean, even our conversation last week was really creating this feedback circle for both of us. So one of the things people may not know, Antoine has his own, our Black Heights has its own YouTube channel. And so one of the things Antoine and I are very engaged in is providing feedback for each other on things that we can do to improve our content, or just as far as being supportive of each other in our content. That feedback is what made me think, okay, number one, this is somebody I want to partner with and make sure that I'm vested in their success. But also, this is somebody that I feel like we can have this conversation and it would add value to those who are listening live or those who are actually watching on the replay. So I'm looking forward to it. One other thing I want to add about why I wanted to do this particular topic with you. So with Antoine, our last Intersation topic was creating opportunity. And then I hope you don't mind me sharing, because I didn't ask, but it's too late now.
No,
in that Intersation, and it was like one of your earlier videos that you were doing, I believe, as a matter of fact. Antoine was still learning the YouTube climate as far as video interaction versus face-to-face interaction versus business interaction versus personal interaction. And one of the pieces of feedback that came in was from one of our viewers of that show. They said, man, Antoine had amazing knowledge to drop with what he was talking about in regards to creating opportunity. However, the viewer felt like he didn't connect with them. And it was like there was this disconnect, because there was a disconnect between the energy that they wanted to feel from Antoine. They loved what he had to say, but they didn't feel the human heartbeat behind it. And so one of the things that I liked was Antoine didn't get into that chat and get a defensive like, oh, who are you to tell me who I need to be? I gave you jewels and gems. You should be grateful.
Now, Billy, I must say, it doesn't mean that I didn't want to do that, but I didn't.
We all write 6 emails and backspace them all. We all do that.
Oh my God. Yeah, it was good feedback. Yeah, I forgot the young lady's name, but she did leave some really good feedback, and I saw her point, and I definitely accepted that point as well. So thank you to the person that left the comment, and it really helped me engage with my audience on my podcast, and not only mine, and others as well. So Billy, your platform was the one that actually caused it, and I'm glad that I got that taste early on. So appreciate it, my brother, and appreciate the person who left the comment as well.
Right, and that's, man, I don't even want to get into the Intersation yet, but that's why, another reason why I felt like you'd be a good guest to have on this particular topic. But with that being said, let's jump into tonight's topic: applying feedback with Antoine Wade of Black Heights. Black Heights got a shirt. But the first question, as you know from the first Intersation, the first question I start off with every Intersation is always the same. Antoine, what is this topic of applying feedback? What does this topic mean to you?
Well, it means a lot to me, Billy. As I mentioned before, you can use feedback for your personal development, and I'm a big fan of personal development. So let me just start from the beginning. Feedback, what is it, right? It's the information that you can use to change behavior or adapt to a behavior. And to me, it's the difference between success and failure. It's the difference between life and death a lot of the times, right? And it's also the difference between happy and sadness. So I'll take you through some of the lighter sides when we get further into the podcast, but it's very important information that you can use for your personal development, and that's how I see feedback as well. Feedback can also be things that you don't want to accept. And Billy used an example when we first started the show about some feedback, and I could have chosen to not use it, but I did use it, assuming positive intent, and it's really helped me with my overall personal development on YouTube. So that's what it means to me, my man. It means, the difference between success and failure, the difference between life and death, as well as the difference between being happy and sad, my man.
I like that. You're right. It is in short, feedback is a game changer. It almost gives you the cues on when things need to be tweaked or adjusted. It's interesting because one of my cousins, Brian Sr., is in here, and I was going over the video content from his Intersation, Never Settle, and I was going over it today. And one of the things when I was thinking about feedback was like, wow, how do you keep that disturbance? How do you keep that internal disturbance going so that you're never settling for a place that you don't want to be at, or a place that you don't want to be in? And it really comes to being able to receive feedback. Now, doesn't mean receiving it and just taking it at face value and using it. Everything that you get is not necessarily good feedback. However, being able to receive feedback can be that determining factor that says, okay, now that I'm out of my sensitive space, because I think we've all had those moments in life where, you know, you get feedback at work or you get feedback with somebody you care about, and then you're like, well, fine, I'm not talking to you no more. Now I'm just going to be bland, Billy. I'm just going to be bland, Antoine. And you get into this emotional state where you really don't want to, and you don't want to look at the feedback and assume, I like what you said, assume that it's coming from a positive intent. It's coming from a place of wanting to see you do better, not wanting to talk bad about you. So for me, applying feedback is something that I apply in my life on a daily basis. I'm always asking, and it sounds weird, but it's to help me get better. I'm always asking for, what can I do better? And I rarely ask for like, hey, what did I do right there? Did I do good? I'm kind of out of that place in life where I'm looking for that, we'll call it fatherly validation. I'm kind of out of that place in life. More so I'm looking for, okay, how can I improve? How can I sharpen? How can I get better? So that's what applying feedback means for me. It's the application of information from a third-party perspective. If I was to give it a definition, that's how I would define it. So again, I hope you enjoyed that first easy question, because that's the slow pitch. Now we're going into fast pitch hardball. So for my next question, I want to ask you is, for you, why do you feel that? Because you said feedback can be the difference between happiness and sadness, success and failure, in all these different areas. Why do you feel that feedback is critical to success in general or overall?
Yeah, what I would say, Billy, is this, right? You can look at feedback in multiple ways, and I'm going to talk about just me using it for personal development, assuming a positive intent. We give feedback every single day to our coworkers, our spouses, our girlfriends, and our friends, right? For example, when I met my wife, we was out one night. I was with a buddy, and I was standing over a bar a little bit high in the air, looking over, and I saw this pretty young lady, right? And I just was staring at her and caught her attention, and she was staring at me, right? So that's a sign of feedback that gave me the okay to want to go and talk to her, right? And you think about feedback from kids. I have two kids, a 1-year-old and a 4-year-old. And the feedback that I give my 1-year-old is, yes, you know, that's right, or the no, that's wrong, right? And it is to correct the behaviors and to help him continue to know what the good behaviors are, right? So if you don't get feedback, you're not going to be able to personally develop. One of my favorite books is The 1 Minute Manager. And what they talk about in that book is this, Billy. Outside of talking about goals, they have two other big points of that. And that is to use a 1-minute praise to give your employees positive feedback. And the second thing is a 1-minute reprimand if you are somehow express dissatisfaction. And again, that's to help correct the personal behaviors of others, to put them in a path to success, right? And professionally, let me talk about that. You know, it's the information that you need to help get you to the next level. With growth, you need people to give you feedback so that you understand you're on the right path. It is the information that you get when to allow you to understand if you're meeting your goals, your KPIs and things like that, right? So it's very, very important. And what I would say on a professional level, what I've seen in the workplace is people not asking for a lot of feedback, Billy. Something that, you know, you and yourself and myself pride ourselves on is, after our podcast, we call other people for feedback, or we text each other for feedback, right? People need to ask that. They need to be able to ask for feedback in order for them to personally develop. And that's what I've seen in the workplace. So, you know, it is critical for your success because it gives you a better understanding of how you are doing. And typically it should come right on time to help you with your with those behaviors, right?
Right. No, I agree with you. And, you know, you actually bring up an area that I wasn't even thinking of feedback in, because personally, yeah, we get feedback, like you said, with the parental role, being a parent and being a child at one point. I've definitely received that feedback, and I've had to give that feedback. But from the romantic standpoint, that's an area that I wasn't even in this content thinking of, the romantic feedback, the cues, the innuendos that we get. Just from social interacting, like, hey, I'm looking at this woman, she's looking at me, and neither one of us are breaking eye contact. That's a feedback cue to say, hey, I need to go over there and say something. If I'm interested, then it's time for me to make my move.
Absolutely.
Or if you're in the new age of thinking, you might want to wait until she comes to you, but that's not how I think. So not knocking you if that is how you think, but that's not how I think. And that is critical to the success of the relationship, because that's the first feedback, but the feedback cues and the feedback itself becomes more complex as the relationship develops. Even like you said with your child, yes, that's right, no, that's wrong. That becomes a lot more complex as they get older, and you have to kind of explain, no, that's wrong because you need to do it this way, or it's better or more effective or efficiently to do it this way. Those feedback cues. One of the things that for me, when it comes to the success or the failure of feedback, it's like, I look at it from a professional standpoint, because I mean, that's where I spend a lot of my time at, is in the professional realm, is if you're not giving me the feedback on the things that I'm doing wrong, how am I supposed to know to correct them? Like, I'm not talking about the no-brainers, like showing up to work late, or, being on your cell phone, or not helping customers when they walk in the door. But I mean, like, the small things, like even sometimes it might be in the way that you present, the way you speak, the odor that you carry in with you to work. Like, some people don't know, like, personal hygiene things. And if nobody's ever going to say, like, hey, that smell you're lingering with you is not right, then how are you supposed to know? Because, as you know, anytime you're under the smell 24/7, you go smell blind to it. You don't know you stink. Yep. So it can mean success or failure, because then that smell is like, he has all the other attributes for management. However, we can't see that smell being in the boardroom.
Yep.
And now you're crippling your success. So I agree with you on that standpoint. We got something I want to bring in here from the chat really quick before we move to the next question. Sure. I think it's just a comment, but it says, Brian Sr. says, we haven't cornered the market on anything, including our area of expertise. Feedback is a bridge. Where that bridge leads you depends on how receptive you are. Hashtag positive intent, hashtag stay curious. I love that. That's that. I'm telling you, I'm going to take that from you, man. I'm going to borrow it indefinitely. That positive intent is something that is significant, and when it comes to feedback. And
go ahead. Billy, on that, I got that from a boss of mine. When I first came to the company, he was probably one of the I would have thought at the time one of the worst bosses I ever had, but also one of the best ones as well. And what I mean by that is he was always pushing for excellence. And there were a time where he would give feedback, and I would just not want to accept it because of his delivery to it. And one of the things he said, Antoine, because we had that conversation about how his delivery was and how I'm able to receive it, right? And what's the best way for me? And he said, Antoine, what I can just tell you is that the feedback that I'm going to give you is going to come from a good place in my heart. And for you to get a better understanding of me, just assume positive intent. And, that ended up being a core principle that our company is led by. Being prepared, assume positive intent when you're giving feedback, be transparent, right? And that's where I took that from, my man. It was just the assume positive intent, and that's helped a lot. It's helped a lot within my career when people are coaching me or giving me feedback on whatever it is that I do, my man.
Yeah, and like you said, you thought it was possibly the worst boss you had in your entire life, and then you find out that no, that even in the we'll say the bad situations, we can find something that is worth gleaning to and taking with you out of it. So that is definitely a gem. And I don't know if the rest of the chat feels that way, but I do. And I know Brian Sr. does. So we're good with that. 3 people, that's good enough for me. So for my next question that I have for you, I want to kind of stay in the realm of feedback, like with this positive intent thing. But for you, and you've kind of answered it with this, but what do you feel has been the most effective delivery of feedback for you thus far? And you can expand upon that positive intent, but I want to see it from the standpoint of what you've received and also what you've provided, because I want this to be a two-way conversation.
Yes, sir. So for me, delivering feedback is always situational, right? You have to know the right place, the right time to deliver feedback, right? So, but what I pride myself on is this, Billy, is managing teams that I have in the past, and that I managed one is I give feedback to individuals typically in my one-on-ones. My one-on-ones is something that I have on a weekly basis for at least 30 minutes with my teammates, or if I need to give them feedback a little bit earlier after some sort of meeting or something like that, they get it right away. But, you know, an example of that is on yesterday, I had a presentation and one of my employees was in the presentation and they were delivering the presentation. And of course, he said something that really summed up a slide that he was presenting to a customer. And I was like, wow, that's the first time I ever heard that. He said something like, you know, backbone or something like that about our network, our supply chain network. And it was just really eloquently said. So, you know, after that meeting, once we got off the conference call, I said to him, you know, that was a great job. You used that word and it just was a polished presentation. So that's, you know, how I've been able to deliver that. If it's something that, you know, I need to get feedback on to corrective actions, if it's in a meeting perspective, I would hold that and, you know, take this person and, you know, have a private meeting and deliver it to them with, you know, typically the ice cream sandwich, right? You say something positive and then you say something, what you want to give them feedback on in the middle, and then you say something positive on the tail end of it as well, too, right? So you don't want to, you know, leave people with just feedback that's always negative, right? So that's kind of how I typically do it with the ice cream sandwich model, Billy. You know, the best thing that I would say is when you're delivering feedback to people, you don't want, especially if it's negative. And I think that's what the issue is here is, or it's no issue, but when you think about feedback, people always think that it is negative. And a lot of the times it is, but feedback can come in positive ways where it can be a form of advice, right? So when it's constructive feedback, it's never good to give it in front of people unless that person asks for it, right? So that's, I just pride myself on delivering feedback that way. Typically one-on-ones, I do it, you know, as fast as possible. You know, time of the essence, because you don't want to forget about it and you want that person to continue along that positive behavior that you complimented, or either to think about that negative behavior that you saw and you were giving feedback on. But how I receive feedback, I like to receive it right away, Billy. After shows like this, I will call my sisters and be like, hey, you know, Tiffany and Tam, how did I do on that, right? And I'm looking for that sort of feedback. And I really want it right away. In our workshops that we have at Black Heights, one of the things that we do is we offer surveys after the workshop, right? Because we want that feedback right away, because it's going to be the top of the person's mind at that point in time too. So, and we use that feedback to improve, right? To improve our personal skills, to improve the services that we offer, and things like that. But I prefer to receive it blunt. I just remember the time, Billy, when, you know, I was playing football, and, you know, Friday nights is game night. Saturday mornings is film study, right? And that film study is always there and put in place so that you can recover, get a good night of sleep. But the next morning, you're looking at areas where you can improve. And that's the feedback loop that people need in order for them to personally grow. So, man, that's you're delivering. That's how I do it. And from a receiving standpoint, I like it blunt. I like people to be straight up, and I ask for it pretty much right away, my man.
Right. No, I'm with you on the blunt. Like, and it's funny because for me, one of my biggest things that I've had to work on is being defensive and not as receptive to feedback as I should be. But that doesn't change the fact that I want it blunt. Like, I don't need you to tiptoe around it, kind of work your way back to it. Like, give me what it is that I need to work on so that we can hurry up and get through this conversation so that I can go and start working on it. But one of the things that from the providing feedback perspective that you said that kind of got me thinking was really, you don't want your feedback to come off as an attack. Because when people feel attacked, they get defensive. Walls go up, barriers go up, and now all of a sudden it's like the feedback just is not even getting to an ear, let alone going one ear out the other. And so I think that's one of the aspects of providing feedback is that if you're going to give somebody feedback, the best way to not come across as it's an all-out attack is probably to just simply ask permission. Like, I mean, obviously in the professional realm, if you manage people, you may have to give feedback immediately. But from the personal realm, it's just a matter of saying, hey, do you mind if I try to shed some light or give you some insights on some things that I noticed? And when you ask for that permission, that immediately, I believe, diffuses a person from an attack, because nobody ever comes up and says, hey, would you mind if I punch you in the face? No, they come up and they start swinging, and you got to start matrixing. So,
Yep.
So that is definitely really, really great things that I just wanted to, not my things, but really great things that your response brought out. We do have a couple of questions here in the chat that I want to take time to address. The very first question is from Tamara. Is it Tamara or Tamara? Tamara.
Yep.
Tamara Wade, how often should you ask for feedback? Is there a such thing as too much feedback? I'll let you respond to that first, since that is your sister. And then
that's a good question. I think you should often ask as often as you need to, right? If you think that you are uncomfortable with certain situations, uncomfortable doing certain tasks, I think it's best to ask for that feedback, because then if people see you asking for feedback, they're going to be more likely to give it to you, and also watch the little things that you do that could help you with your personal development in that area where you're asking for feedback from, right? Is there such thing as too much feedback? I personally would say yes, right? Or asking for too much feedback, I would say yes. After a while, right, I think you should be getting confident in the things that you're asking for feedback on. So if you're constantly asking the same, person, or the same, asking for advice on the same sort of thing, trying to get feedback, that may be a little bit too much, especially if you're asking the same person. But then you can try to diversify who you're getting that feedback from, because you don't want to be that person that's asking for too much when you should be probably getting the advice that you need to correct that behavior, right? So if there's such thing as too much feedback, asking for it, yes. Do people give too much feedback as well? Yes, people who are very critical about changing behaviors, and that's when you just have to know the difference between what is positive feedback and what feedback that you can't dismiss. When people offer too much feedback to you, most of the time it isn't coming from a positive intent, I would say, at least in my personal experience. And you just have to understand what you need to do to be able to accept whatever it is that you need to accept, and be able to get rid of whatever it is that you don't need to. But in all honesty, you shouldn't be around people who are always giving you feedback, and especially if it's pretty negative, right? That shouldn't be that type of person that's in your circle, unless you're working with that person. And in that case, there may be an issue within your role that you just need some corrective actions in, and that person is probably helping you to get better. And I would say that typically happens, Billy, when you're trying to manage people out, right? That's when you're giving people too much feedback, and you're doing that for a specific reason. And if you're on the receiving end of that feedback, you already know what time it is. That means that you correct your behavior, or you're on your way out of the door. So that's how I would answer that.
Yeah, no, I agree with you 100% because some of the things immediately that I started writing off or writing down was first the first part. How often should one ask for feedback? Honestly, it's as much as you possibly can.
Yep.
But you bring in the exact point that I would bring up is you want to be asking that feedback from multiple vantage points, because if every time you turn around, if it's only you and I, and every time I turn around, it's like, Billy, so how did I do? Billy, is that good? Billy, Billy. I'm like, get the hell away from me.
That's right. That's right. And somebody in the chat, Brian Sr. says, can asking for too much feedback come across as being insecure or lacking confidence? I think Billy just answered that, right?
Absolutely.
Yes. Yeah, absolutely.
It becomes needy. And one of the things I put was confidence issue before he typed that. So my cousin and I are on the same page. But the other thing was repetitive feedback. It can also be perceived as incompetence, because if you're asking for feedback about the same thing over and over and over again, at some point, the word's going to get around, even if you're using different vantage points, that this person doesn't get it. And then that's when you start seeing the managing the person out of the organization, or the managing the person out of the relationship, or the managing the person out of the functions in the family, like whatever the management issue is, you start seeing that happen. And so there's that aspect. And then the other aspect from the second part of your question, is there a such thing as too much feedback? There is, but the one fortunate thing about the human experience, that at least in my perception, that I believe is fortunate for the human experience, is we're actually hardwired for feedback. Like, you can just take something as simple as your sensory connections. If I touch something, there is a feedback immediately that goes to my brain and says, oh, you're applying X amount of pressure. This is hot. This is cold. All these different things are providing feedback from simple touch, from smell, from taste, from sound, from sight. All these things are hardwired into us to accept feedback. So will we ever be overloaded by feedback? I don't think that's possible. However, there is a such thing, I believe, again, as asking for too much feedback. And the last thing I'll say is create healthy rhythms or healthy cadence for feedback, to get feedback. So one of the things for me professionally, I am a very self-starter, self-thinker. I'm pretty much like, if I can explain why I did something the way I did it, I sometimes just do it. And then when my boss says, well, hey, next time, can you ask us to do that? Okay, my bad. I can take that feedback and then be more upfront with information. However, in my one-on-ones with my bosses, when I take time to say, okay, is there anything that I can work on? Is there anything that you see that I'm lacking in? Here's the areas that I'm not secure on, that I want to get better in, and I want more exposure to that. So there's different cadences for different situations. But I think in those moments when you're one-on-one, the best thing that you can do to make sure that you're getting the feedback that you need in the rhythms and the amount that you need is to just be honest about what your needs are and be receptive to what the feedback can be. That's what my long and short answer would be to that.
Yep.
We actually have another question in the chat from Mark Anthony. How do you gain more confidence in giving feedback to your employees? Mr. Antoine Wade.
Wow, that's a good one. It comes with practice, Mark Anthony. It certainly does. And I've learned over time with just practice reading manager books and, getting experience, putting things that I've learned into action, right? And you're going to be able to get better at delivering feedback once you start to deliver more feedback, right? So that's how you're going to get the confidence in doing it. And one of my favorite management books is called Becoming the Effective Manager. And they talk about that and giving feedback in your one-on-ones. And if you do that on a weekly basis, you're going to get better at doing it, and especially at giving constructive feedback. I think constructive feedback is something that everybody has a hard time doing, especially as you get older, because you think that you don't think people do take it personally a lot of the times. And Billy brought up a good point. You really have to ask, hey, Billy, can I have about 1 minute to give you some feedback? And typically, if you ask that mode, people are going to be receptive and not take it as a negative, as anything negative towards them. And they're going to assume positive intent for the most part. So Billy, you brought that up earlier, and that's really how a lot of effective management books teach you, a lot of workshops that I've been throughout my entire life. You want to start asking those questions. And the more you practice, the more you get better at it, Mark Anthony. Hope that answers your question, my man.
Yeah, I think that's a great answer. The only other thing I would add to your answer, Antoine, is invest in knowing who your people are.
Yes.
The better you know somebody, the easier it is to know how to approach them. Yep. Because I'm a very combative person. People know not to approach me with combat. I'm really good at that. Why would you want to approach me with that? You're going to lose. Like, that's how I see it in my mind. So knowing your people, knowing your employees, and at some point, I think this might have been said in an Intersation I did on inside leadership. At some point, genuinely caring about your people. Like, I'm not giving you this feedback because I want you to be a horrible employee for me and or your next employer or in anything you do. I'm giving you this feedback because I care about you and want to offer you this insight so that you can utilize it and take it wherever you may go. And hopefully it helps you to achieve some successes that you really want to achieve out of life. And so when you have that investment of knowing your people, when you have that investment of really looking out and caring for your people, feedback becomes a lot more, the reception of feedback or it becomes a lot more, less resistant. There's less resistance to the receptive feedback.
That's that's right, Billy. I just want to tag on to that just for a quick second here. The number one rule of being an effective manager is to know your people. At the end of the day, it's about your people. And Billy, you hit the nail on the head. It is about knowing your people. So you're going to get more confidence as you know your people and as you practice more. I think the number two thing of being an effective manager is talking about your goals and KPIs, right? And you have to do so often. And a lot of the times when you're talking about your goals and KPIs, especially with your team, you're going to be giving that feedback. The number three thing is asking for more, because you're always going to want your team to constantly get better. It's the same example that I used earlier with my boss that I hated. And, I thought he ended up being one of the best managers ever because he was always asking me for more. And the last thing I would say is to delegate. So those are, for the most critical things I think, and I've used throughout my entire career to become an effective manager. And Billy nailed that one is, getting to know your people. It is the most important thing. And it's not just from management in a professional standpoint. It's also management in your personal life with your kids, your wife, your girlfriend, your boyfriend, your friends. It's the most important thing, man.
Yeah, no, I agree with you. Even though you agree with me, I agree with you. It is the most important thing. Yes, I'm going to come back to the chat in a moment. I want to move to our next question that we have here. So we've talked about this a little bit already about the personal and the professional realm, but really when it comes to feedback, what are the difference, or in your opinion, what is the difference in approach versus providing feedback in a professional environment versus providing feedback in the personal environment where maybe you're more comfortable? They say people who you love the most typically know you the best. So you might be a little less patient with that person than you would with somebody who you work with professionally. In your opinion, what's the difference between that professional and personal feedback?
Well, I really think it's about the setting, Billy, right? When I think about, feedback and the difference between the personal and the professional, your personal one is typically in, outside of the office. That's first thing, right? But you have to think about this. What behaviors are you trying to influence? What behaviors are you trying to correct, right? And if it's something that is outside of your profession, that is when it's really, personal feedback, right? In a professional setting, it's typically done with inside the workplace, in the one-on-ones, doing meetings and things like that. And what I would say is there is such thing as personal professional feedback, and you get those from mentors and things like that happens outside of the office. But what I would say is this, Billy, is that the difference that I can think of at this point in time is just the setting. Where is that feedback delivered at, right? So if I'm in my house right now, right? And me talking to my wife, and after watching this video, we can turn it on and replay it, and she can give me feedback there, right? So that's the difference. It's that personal feedback, but also at the same time, it's to help me build my professional brand as well too. So that's the difference. What I mean by personal and professional feedback together, my man.
Okay, no, I like that. I think setting is the key element that changes. One of the things that actually got me thinking about from the personal standpoint, and this is not necessarily to this direct question, but from the personal standpoint, how would you go about handling passive feedback? Those feedbacks where, okay, well, I left the trash by the door, so that obviously meant I wanted him to take it out, or I put the kids to bed early and made dinner, so obviously I would like some services, whatever it may be. How do you interact with those, and how do you, I would say, because you said you like direct, blunt feedback, how do you encourage to remove the passive and get the direct feedback?
Yeah, it comes down to what we talked about earlier. It's talking about getting to know your people, right? And a lot of the times you have to give feedback in order for you to get the behaviors that you want back, right? So for instance, you use the example of the trash by the door. That's a good one, man, because that can happen at any point in time in my house. It's just by the door. You know what to do with that, right? And that's something my wife has coached me into, right? That's the feedback. I put it by the door, and you can go and take it out, right? Because I'm too busy if I don't get to it. And the example of I put the kids to bed, what time that is, because of we know each other. It's about getting to know one another and getting to know your people, right? So you're going to be able to get that feedback, right, from knowing someone, and also be able to change behaviors because of your giving feedback as well, too, man. So if you think it's passive in your personal life, tell that person, give them an example of the way you would want to accept that feedback, assuming positive intent. Encourage them that this is the how I can respond better to your attempt to give me feedback. This is a certain way, right? So that's exactly what I did with my boss at that time. Is I wanted to have a conversation with him about it, and like, hey, this is how I respond better, not the way that you approach it. And we came to an agreement, assume positive intent, and that's how we end up, working very well together and end up being my best boss, right? And that's the same thing that you can do in your personal life as well, too, man. You just have to have those conversations.
Yeah, and it's interesting because one of the things which you're talking about your boss and that interaction, one of the things that I think we do inherently as people is we give feedback the way that we want to receive feedback.
Yes,
and
that's deep, brother.
That may not always work. And it typically, like for me in my young professional life, it came off as very combative. Like, I'm telling you one thing and I just assume negative intent. So you're telling me I don't work. Like, there's in a situation where there's only two of us and something doesn't get done, I know you didn't do it and I didn't do it. So you're questioning my work ethic. Like, I take feedback from this roundabout conversation so you're questioning my work ethic is the feedback you're giving me. And here's how I feel about when people question my work ethic when I'm working my ass off, like 10, 11, 9 hours in a day. I'm going to come and feel some kind of way about that. So I'm giving now direct feedback on, hey, don't question my work ethic because I work too hard for that. If you want to know what I'm doing, you're my boss, ask me. But if you don't want to know what I'm doing, or if something's not getting done and you don't communicate it and you haven't made it a priority for us, then it's not a priority to me. And that's why I haven't done it yet. And so I'm communicating that direct when he's like, hey, I kind of like to have a cup of coffee and a cookie before we get into the heavy stuff. I'm like, well, here's steak. So I definitely, I like what you're saying there, but I just feel like that's an area for me that we'll probably have to continually work on, is not providing the feedback the way that I would want the feedback. I want to jump back into the chat here because there's a question that was asked, but I didn't want to get to it yet. Tamara, before we got to this next section of the conversation. But Tamara asked here, actually, let's go back. She actually said, great answers. And then she asked a question. She said, what should you do if someone gives you feedback that you disagree with? Ooh. Don't ask me that question. I'm not mature enough yet.
You know, a lot of the times we end up not wanting to be mature about getting feedback that that you disagree with, right? And a lot of the times we want to fly off the rails and fly off the handles. That's why, you know, we have to pause. We have to think positive intent, right? And just wait for a bit. But what I've been able to do along the line, especially if somebody gives me feedback and I just disagree with, I politely say thank you, right? You know, that's wonderful feedback. And you can also just not implement it, right? Or nod, smile, you know, saying, you know, that's ways that you can really accept the feedback, not change anything, but also be polite with getting that feedback, right? So that's typically what I do when I disagree with that feedback. Or there's other things you can just say, you know, have a conversation about it. If somebody says, okay, well, I did it this way, or you did it this way, giving you feedback, it's probably best if you do it this way. And if you disagree with that, you can say, well, politely, thanks for the feedback. This is the reason why I'm doing it my way. But you have to do it in a professional manner all the time, I think. And at the end of the day, when you get feedback, in order for you to be able to use it properly for personal development, assuming positive intent, is you just have to listen to it. You really do have to listen to it and really know yourself to think about if it's something that's coming from a good place and if you should be able to apply it, even if you disagree with it or not, right? Billy used the example of that person leaving a chat, right? I had flown from San Francisco to Romania. It was probably 2 o'clock in the morning, probably get like maybe 2 hours of sleep that previous night. And at the end of the day, I thought I was, you know, coming off with an executive presence, right? And this lady had a spin to it of you're not in a corporate world, so that executive presence doesn't work for engaging your people with on YouTube. So I could have initially disagreed with it and went off, right, and disregarded. But I took a step back. I asked my wife, I asked Billy Rowe and said something about my energy. And, you know, they gave me feedback on it as well. And I used that for personal development. So you really just have to know how to handle that situation. I think I gave you a couple examples of how to do it, though.
Yeah, no, I think you gave great examples. One of the other things that, and it's something that I use still to date, is I have learned that when somebody gives me feedback that I disagree with, and this is going to be, don't take this as you should do this, but for me, as long as it's not attacking my character, I have learned that I can reflect later on it and decide if I want to ingest that or not. I don't have to drink it. I don't have to like keep it in my refrigerator or anything like that. I just learned that it's okay to hear what somebody has to say and reflect on it later. And I think when you disagree with it, you can disagree with it the moment it comes out of their mouth, but you can reflect on that later and find out why you disagree with it. And then that's when feedback, whether it's good or bad, and I don't mean in the sense of positive or negative, I mean, whether it's good and it matches the story that you tell yourself, or it's bad and it doesn't match the story that you tell yourself, that's when you can actually take something from either story, because you're able to reflect and say, no, that doesn't really resonate with me, and here's why it doesn't resonate with me. So you get more clarity on who you are and why you may be doing something the way that you're doing it versus the way the feedback was given to you. So you can, at the end of the day, feedback is opinion. Like, it's a person's opinion on how you should do something or why you should do something a certain way. And as you know, you're entitled to your opinion just like they're entitled to yours. However, their opinion may decide that you're no longer fit for your job. So
yes, true that.
And so I wanted to ask that question before we got to this question. So how do you avoid the temptation to retaliate to feedback that you're not ready to hear?
Yeah. You know, I learned very early. I learned with the example from Mr. Hampman, my boss, right? And, you know, a lot of times you just have to stop and assume positive intent. You have to think about it. You have to really just take it in and try to understand exactly where it's coming from and who's delivering it to you, right? And typically, I've been able to, take feedback that I've gotten from people and ask, somebody like my wife or a good friend of mine, if this is something that I really should be paying attention to, and that avoids me from wanting to retaliate. I know a lot of the times in a work setting, we get emails about certain things, and a lot of the times you have to reply, right? So you start typing. It's the truth, right? It's like, God, I gotta get it. I gotta get it. That's just the craziest thing ever. Why would he say something like that? Or you're defending yourself, right? A lot of the times you just gotta think about it. Hit the pause button. Go take a walk, whatever it is that you need to do in order for you to calm down. You have to do that a lot of times. But I must say this, Billy, it's hard. It's hard, guys. I think that's personal development that we're going to need for the rest of our lives, whether we're getting that feedback from our husbands, our wives, or our coworkers, or our peers, or whoever it is. It's very hard. And at the end of the day, I say this, right? Assume positive intent, my man.
No, I agree. That positive intent, I'm telling you, I'm taking that with me for the remainder of this year and into the rest of the years to follow. One of the things for me that I've learned is no matter how good you get at receiving feedback, right when you think you have it perfected, somebody is going to come with some asinine type of feedback that you didn't think of, and it's going to knock you off balance. So it's really not about the fact of if you're going to get knocked off balance. It's just when you're going to get knocked off balance, and understanding that, okay, if I'm going to be caught off guard at some point, how do I want my reaction to be perceived? Do I want to come off as a person who can't take feedback regardless of what the feedback is? Or do I want to come off as a person who at least can hear feedback and then either later come with an intelligent rebuttal, or if you're not in an emotionally compromised state from the feedback, be able to come with an intelligent rebuttal at that time. And I use rebuttal loosely because you don't have to rebut. You can't rebute somebody's opinion. Like, their opinion is their opinion, so your rebuttal doesn't really matter to what their opinion is. Yep. You might be able to help clarify some things that will help them understand to see it in a different light, but you can't really decide to change their opinion for them. Yep. Let me catch up really quick in the live chat because we got a couple of things here. As far as Jennifer Chambers, she says, amen, there is nothing worse than unsolicited feedback. Permission is everything. Reward and then ask permission to redirect. Okay. Tiffany Wade, she has a question. Has anyone given you both incorrect feedback that resulted in a negative outcome, a boss or a friend? Woo! Go ahead.
Ooh, man. Jeez, Tiffany, you had to ask a question like that. Look at you. Incorrect feedback. I think in a professional setting, you find yourself a lot of times getting data to make decisions, right? And there are times when you're looking for an outcome based on your intuition, and the data is saying something else, right? And you typically go with the data. Well, at least a lot of times I do, because I'm really analytical and I like to be factual, knowing that my intuition is saying something else. And I accepted that data to make a decision, and it ended up being wrong, right? So that's an example where, I was giving incorrect feedback and it resulted into a negative outcome. Now, of course, we were able to pull ourselves out of that position, but it did result in wasted time loan. And we had to, correct and make that up. But that's times, Tiffany, where, or that's an example where I've been giving, feedback. And what I mean by feedback here is, I could have said something and this person, said, Antoine, no, you need to be looking at it this way. Here's the data to show it. But my gut, said something else. And I took that and I applied it, and it was negative. And I don't think it was anything that was intentional. That was just what the data was showing, how he pulled it. And I implemented that data, and it turned into a missed timeline on something that we had to deliver. So yeah, that's an example of a time when I've took feedback from someone, applied it, and it turned into a negative outcome. But at the end of the day, we were able to correct that and make things better. So that's my example. Billy, what's yours, sir?
Man, well, first I want to say for your example, but accepting that feedback and applying it and finding out the negative result, that also does teach you to have more confidence in your gut and your intuition.
Absolutely.
On the numbers. So I think that that's a great example. My example is more so a personal example. And it's interesting because part of what we were talking about earlier about being a manager and knowing your people, part of that when you're in a personal aspect is knowing the person who's giving you the feedback. And I don't mean the accusatory state of, well, you don't got your house in order, so how are you going to tell me anything? But understanding their mindset and understanding what they come from and where they're at. So the example that I have is personal, where I was under my gut instinct was like, this relationship that I'm in is not the one. And having somebody speak into my life saying, well, you want your family to be a family and you want these things and all this different stuff. I was like, okay, well, I guess I want that. And so I went all the way into like a full marriage and was like, okay, so now I'm in this marriage that my gut said, I don't think this is my forever. And I'm in this marriage trying to be the husband and the father. And, two people, young, naive, not really knowing what marriage is. Both were both making some catastrophic mistakes. And all this is because I didn't trust my instinct of, hey, you know what? This is not the forever. Like, hey, we had a child together. I think we can collaborate, co-parent, and love this child together. However, us being together is not the best for either one of us. And so taking that advice, not really paying attention to the person who was giving the advice and some of the choices they made in their life that maybe they've regretted and wanted to see something better for me. They interjected some feedback that, had I just trusted my own gut, I wouldn't have made some of the choice that I inevitably made to marry the person. And that's no dig to her. That's just, I think we both would agree with that analysis. So there are times that you take it, but again, it comes to what do you learn? What lessons do you learn from that? And how do you move forward? I can honestly say that had I not gone through that marriage, probably a lot of ways that I have matured today, I wouldn't have matured. Like the whole backspacing on emails, whether personal or professional, I probably wouldn't have developed that until I lost a couple of jobs. Because I'm telling you, my backspace is mean to the place of like when I've worked in call centers and I've seen in call center environments where people will say things, they'll hit the mute button and they'll say some crazy things while the customer's on the phone, and you're like, okay, if that's what you want to do. But for me, I don't trust mute buttons like that. So I just keep everything that I might want to say in my mind, because if I let it out and it's not muted, I'm losing my job that day. So those are the things that I take from, trusting your gut. I trust my gut that says, muting the mic and hoping that they don't hear you is not a good strategy for keeping your job, not a good strategy, because people who work with you, who may be in leadership positions later on, might see you doing that. And that's not really professional. So it's just taught me to trust my gut a lot more frequently. You're inevitably going to make mistakes. You're inevitably going to fail at certain things, but it's always going to come back for me. What lessons can you take from that? I want to move further down the chat so we can be all the way caught up. It looks like Mark Anthony said, "Thank you both, Mr. Wade and Mr. Wade and Rowe. Helps a lot." And then Brian Senior says, "Do you always have the luxury to obtain permission to provide feedback in the workplace? If I feel like permission separates personal and professional feedback." I agree with that last statement. Go ahead.
That's strong. You have a very good point there, Mr. Brian Senior there. What I would say is this, though. I think it is great to always ask to give people permission, because as Billy stated earlier, what it does is it allows people to drop that defense mechanism that comes up whenever you're getting feedback. And it allows for you to accomplish what you need to accomplish, which is delivering that feedback. A lot of the times when we just jump off and giving feedback without asking, we find ourselves in battles. We find ourselves in arguments. So the rule of thumb that I've used in my personal life and what I've studied, especially being an effective manager, it is always best to ask, sir. And it just allows you to get and to deliver the feedback that you need to deliver, because there's a study that's there. When you ask for feedback, you're able to, well, the person will be open to receive it over 90% of the time. When you don't ask for feedback, or when you don't ask to give feedback, there's over a 50% chance that you end up getting in some sort of mutual disagreement where you just have to drop it and it's not going to accomplish your goal. So these are studies that I've read, and it's fact. But I think personally, sir, you really do. It's best to ask for permission to give feedback, and you can do that by simply saying, "Hey, Billy, you got a second? I just want to give you a quick feedback on what I saw in the meeting today." And, Billy typically is going to open up and say, "Absolutely, Antoine, let's go and have it." And it could be something that's constructive, and, he'll accept it, or he will have something to say back about it. But it at least gets you to that point where you're actually able to deliver it, and it means something, and potentially it'll be corrective behavior, or it'll be something that's going to help Billy to do things better. So
right.
That's how I'll answer that, sir.
Yeah, no, I agree with you on that. The luxury, really, for me, I think the word is luxury. We all have the luxury of the time that we have. So for me, the question always is, does it matter whether I say this now, or does it matter whether I say this later? Because the feedback is the feedback. If it's positive feedback, no, you can always say that now. I don't think people are not receptive to positive feedback. Because it can come off as praise. Now, I will be the first to tell you, I don't keep a circle of people around me who are just saying, "Great job, Billy, you're the best. Everything you do, everything you touches turns to gold." I don't keep that circle around me, because that is actually crippling feedback, where if I think I can do no wrong and I got 12 people in my ear telling me that I can do no wrong, now when I do wrong, it's like, how dare you say I did something wrong? These 12 people say I do everything right, so you need to get on board with the program. But really, that's what it comes to me is for, does it matter if I say it now, or does it matter if I say it later? What's the difference? Does it dilute it at any by me saying it later in private with that person? So if it doesn't, whether it's personal or professional, if it doesn't, then it's just a matter of making sure that I'm getting that permission. And even in like a one-on-one, where if I'm a manager to an employee, I may start off with, "Hey, do you mind if I give you some feedback?" But at the end of the day, I have to give you the feedback as a manager. I can't like, "Oh, well, he said he didn't want to hear anything negative," or "She said she didn't want to hear anything negative," so I can't give it to them. So there might be some cases where you circumvent permission, or if you don't circumvent the permission standpoint, well, then fine. That's when you start seeing organizations managing you out of the organization. Okay, well, if you're not receptive to feedback, no problem. Here's a write-up. Here's a written. Here's a verbal. Nope, no, sorry, you're on your final. You got to go. And here's why. We have it documented. So whether or not you want to receive feedback, there may be people who are not receptive to it, but at some point, one point or another, they're going to get it. They just may not get it in the package that they want it in, with a box and a pink slip. So I agree that there's always an ability to have permission, but I also think that where we circumvent permission the most is not professionally. We circumvent it with personal people that we're comfortable with, that we expect to be receptive of us, that we anticipate will hear us out. Those are the people that we give feedback, that we try to circumvent permission for feedback with. And so I think if we can get better with the personal, the professional kind of takes care of itself, just from the guidelines and the code of conduct for the employee handbook.
You're right. You're right, Billy. I find a lot of the times where, my wife or I give each other feedback, and I would say we're able to accomplish what we want to accomplish whenever we ask each other, "Hey, is there a good time for me to help? Or is there a time for me to give you feedback on this?" A lot of the times you just don't know what that person has gone through. It could have been a long day with the kids, right? And, saying something sometimes or giving feedback during a time that may not be of the right time may costs the house to blow up, right? so you have to.
I love how you looked up. You're like, may cost.
And so you just have to you have to think about it being situational, and when the right time is there to give feedback, assuming that it needs to be there, the best thing to do is to ask. So that's the only advice I would give my man from a personal standpoint, man. And believe me, the house has blown up a couple of times. I had to build it. I had to rebuild it again. So.
Right. Trust me, I keep some plywood, drywall. I keep a couple of houses supplies close by. So let's. I want to begin to wrap the Intersation, but I have one more question I want to ask you before we get to the closing. For you, what has been the most difficult obstacle for you to overcome when it comes to applying feedback?
That's a very good one. Whether I would say this, Billy, whether it is an opinion, meaning at the end of the day, you did say something that is resonating with me. Feedback is typically an opinion, and that's true. And I would say it's a combination of advice and just information that somebody gives you to try to correct, some sort of behavior to, hopefully cause you to have some success. My most difficult obstacle that I would say is being authentic with that feedback. So let me just give you an example. I just remember being in grad school, and one of the things that we're coached on is, executive presence. And at one point in time, we had to prepare ourselves for going on stage and giving a presentation in front of, hundreds of thousands, whatever it is. So they are correcting everything about you. I mean, you're on videotape. You have this executive coach, with your four other classmates, because you're broken into small groups, so you can get that constructive feedback to make things better. And feedback that I received was on the delivery, but also on how I walked. And they said, okay, well, Antoine, you walk very cool, and you need to use the heels and spurs, or boots and spurs method, which is a nice up proper walk, showing confidence, but at the same time, it's not my walk. And my walk just is, I'm like, the cool walk, right? So at the end of the day, it's taking that feedback and trying to still remain authentic. And that's been probably one of the biggest obstacles that I face when somebody has given me feedback, because you want to correct it, but is it maintaining your authenticity? And people at the end of the day likes authenticity. Authenticity means that you're confident. Authenticity means that you're self-aware, right? In the meaning that I'm talking about here, especially in the professional setting. So that's been the biggest obstacle for me, Billy, is trying to remain and keep it authentic to who Antoine really is and his core values. Now, something like a walk, I have to think about that. Is that stopping my core values of who I am as a person? Absolutely not, right? I know how to turn it on. I know how to turn it off. So, that was just one example where I questioned that at one point in time about, remaining authentic. And at the end of the day, I choose to use the boots and spurs method, and choose to use the Antoine walk whenever I'm not in that mode, right? So, it's situational, my man. So, but that's been the biggest obstacle I've had, Billy, is when people give you feedback. How can you use that feedback to make a corrective behavior, especially if it's something about an attribute that you think is something positive about you and shows your authenticity, and how to use that without showing or without diluting your authenticity. So,
yeah, no, I think that hits it on the nail on the head for me. I mean, it really comes to the identity conflicts that you have, because you start questioning, well, if I change and take this feedback, then am I changing me? But when you're sitting and you're having a logical conversation with yourself, you're like, really, the way I walk, I mean, how much of that really ties into my character? How much of that really ties in to my belief system, my morals, my values? And then when you do all that, you're like, I could be in a wheelchair. I'm not going to change up my morals and my values.
Right.
So
exactly.
So you're able to now impart those things and understand. Sometimes it will be something that you switch on and off. For me, like when I'm in my chair at work, I might sit on the couch, might have a acupressure ball behind me. But when I'm on the video, I try to sit my butt in the back of the chair and have my shoulders at least somewhat back. You're not going to see me like stand like at attention, but you'll see me a little more upright than I would be in a more relaxed or familiar environment. And it's just a presentation thing. It's like, hey, if you're going to be in front of people and it's going to be recorded on the world for the world to see until the end of time, and your great-great-grandchildren can watch this, do you want them to see a grandfather who looks defeated, or do you want them to see a great-great-grandfather who looks like he had pride in the work that he was contributing and the content he was producing? So I agree. There is this switch that you'll decide. Certain things you'll switch off and on. The way I speak, I switch that off and on. I'm very articulate when I speak, whether on video or I'm in the workplace. I try to make sure that I'm very articulate and concise with my words. However, if I'm talking to a friend on the cell phone, I might use slang, or I just might have a more relaxed tone. And that is because of the fact that I've learned those feedback cues for me have taught me that there's certain things that you switch on because it's appropriate to switch on. And then there's certain things that you switch off because it's appropriate to switch off. And just finding that balance and that rhythm is what's really helped me with bringing feedback in and giving feedback as well. Yes, so with that, we don't have any other questions in the live chat. If you do have any questions you want to ask before we get off the air tonight, please feel free to put it in there now. But I want to go ahead and begin to wrap the show. I want to ask you my last question, Antoine. And if you remember from the first Intersation, that is for the viewers tonight, if you were to give them 2 or 3 nuggets that you feel like they should take with them from tonight's Intersation, what would be the main thing that you want them to take with them, whether they're watching live or via the replay?
Well, this has been a wonderful conversation. If I think about the something that I've said that resonated with Billy, and something that I've said that resonated within the chat, was to assume positive intent, guys. I think that is very important when you are getting feedback from people. Is you have to assume positive intent. If you think that way, then a lot of the feedback that you're getting will potentially be, constructive and will help you out within your career, within your personal life. The second thing I would say is ask for feedback. And a lot of the times, we work into a company culture where it's feedback famine, and you only get feedback during a 360-degree feedback day. So that's once a year during your annual reviews. That's a choice by your company, but also at the same time, that's a choice in yourself too. So constantly ask for feedback if you want to be successful in any sort of role, or if you want to be, have a successful personal relationship. You have to ask for feedback and be open to getting that feedback by assuming positive intent. And what I would say for the last thing, and I just queued up for within our that last question, Billy, was to remain authentic. Keep your authenticity there. There's going to be times where you get feedback about certain things that may be about your character. If it's in an area where you do think that you can personally develop in that area, then it might be a time for some change. But at the end of the day, if it's something that you're going to apply, still remain and have some authenticity there, right? So if people are correcting the way how you present, and you have a tone that just works for you, that's unlike others, don't try to be like John, who presents in a storytelling fashion or something like that. Just remain your authenticity, or your authentic self, and deliver the way that you know how to deliver, taking some in that feedback that somebody gave you to improve in the areas where it mattered, that you can change, but still keeping your authenticity there. So those are the 3 things, my man. Assume positive intent, ask for more feedback. That's something that we all can do, especially in the workplace. And then last, I would say, Billy, is what did I say? Remain authentic. Yep.
All right. I like that, man. Well, I definitely want to thank you for being on tonight. Man, I'm telling you, we got to do more of these. We got to get some more collaborations, whether they're on your channel. By the way, his channel's name again is Black Heights. You see the shirt, you see it right there. Bam, Black Heights. or if we do it on first row, either way, I'm good with it either way. But definitely you're a wealth of knowledge, professional knowledge, personal knowledge. And I just really want the viewers of First Row to be able to tap into that, because I feel like you have a lot to offer them. So I appreciate you being on tonight. Those last bullet points, I'm going to provide the tools for the first row, but I might say assume positive intent. Yeah, I just came up with that just to practice. But I definitely appreciate you for being on, taking the time out of your schedule to be on tonight. If you could, one more thing, and I don't know if you have this in front of you, but if you could, one more thing, let people know where they can get in touch with you at and what your next live content is coming up on your channel as well, please.
Yes, sir. Billy, let me just say this, man. Thank you so much for having me on your platform, my brother. I've been following you for a long time, and you just have an amazing platform for personal and professional growth. And I love to come on here and share our knowledge and just working with you in general, man. You're a good brother, and I appreciate all that you're doing. How people can get a hold of me, they can reach out to me on my website, which is https blkheights.com. That's blkheights.com, or they can reach me on my email, which is antoine.wade@blkheights.com, or they can LinkedIn with me, or they can go to the contact us in our website, and that goes to me as well. It goes to my virtual assistant, but also it gets to me as well too. So those are multiple ways where you can get a hold of me. I have live content tomorrow on the Black Heights channel. Tune in at 7 p.m. Pacific time. And our content is really around how do we show positive aspects of African Americans and really record the journey and areas that our active African Americans are having success in, especially in engineering. How do we increase that and be that exposure to the young ones that are coming up, wanting to know more about careers and paths that they can take to have a successful life. So tune in on the Black Heights channel tomorrow at 7 p.m. Pacific time, and we'll be live, baby. We'll be live.
We be live. All right. I'll tune in definitely. So I look forward to seeing it. I'll have to tune in. Oh, I'll tune in because it'll be right after the Wednesday work. So definitely I'll tune in. Yes, so with that, as always, with every Intersation, I like to present something I call tools for the first row. So why the channel or the network's name is First Row is because, number one, it's a play on my last name. WROE is my last name. But number two is it's actually a play because of when I was younger, I was taught by one of my business mentors that the people who sit on the first row, they make the most money, which was something I wanted to make and want to make, and they get the most information because there is no distraction between them and the speaker, the person providing the information. So the first row was born and kind of coined after that. But because you're sitting on the first row, one of the things I like to do is provide tools for the first row. Because you're here, you get some first row benefit perks. So the very first tool that I came up with, these tools, I actually kind of come up with them as I'm creating the content, and they help me further develop my questioning. But the first tool that I came up with 5 total. The first tool I came up with was make feedback about growth. If you can take yourself out of the emotional state of receiving feedback or giving feedback, either direction, two-way street. If you can take yourself out of the emotional state of why you're giving the feedback and really focus on, I want to make this about growth. When you take it from that, I think that will help with that positive intent that Antoine so eloquently put, that I'm stealing. I think that will do that because of the fact that you are really trying to look for the best in that person. Going back to personal feedback, really caring about the success of the person, the future of the person. You're giving them that ability to grow. And then when you're hearing feedback, and if you're looking at it from how can I grow from this information? How can I, even if it's let's say it's incorrect feedback, something that they misinterpreted something you did. The growth is how can I make my actions more concise, so that way when they see me doing something, they realize that I'm doing this for the best of the team or the best of the relationship, versus it being oh, well, here you go with this again. Or every other time, you know, I missed to take the trash out, or I missed the trash guy, you're coming down my back. I don't know if y'all can tell I have some personal issues with the trash, but but that's the first thing. First tool is, again, make feedback about growth. The second tool that I came up with is create a safe place for people to approach you with feedback. I cannot tell you that when somebody is dismissive of feedback, or is always looking for the counterpunch or the counterattack to feedback when it's given, people will stop approaching you with feedback. Now, you may think that is what you want at that time from the emotional lens, but the reality is if feedback is how we get better from the perspectives that we cannot see in the first person perspective that we live in, then the moment you stop getting it, then the only way you're going to get better is whatever you can see from your first person perspective. So that means you're going to have to read a hell of a lot of books, and go through a hell of a lot more education. And then last but not least, you're going to go through a hell of a lot of the school of hard knocks, getting lumped over the head, making mistakes. So make sure that you're creating a safe environment to where people feel comfortable approaching you and giving you feedback. Now, I'm not saying give them a safe environment to come and be disrespectful to you, but give them a space where they feel like, hey, you know what? I noticed this about Billy, and I feel like if I can give him this feedback, he's at least going to hear me and then start making the adjustments that are going to help him be successful. Being on YouTube, you will find really quickly that people are dying to give you feedback about what you do. Whether they do it or not is completely irrelevant as far as that they do what they're giving you feedback on. But they're dying to give you feedback. And if you're going to be on the defensive and counterpunching everybody, eventually you're going to see crickets in your comments. You're going to see crickets in your live chat because nobody feels like it's a safe place to open their mouth and say something. And eventually, if those crickets or those voices are silenced from the audience perspective, eventually you'll have no audience to watch your content. So that's the second tool, is create a safe place for people to approach you with feedback. The third tool that I came up with was remain in control of your belief. And this goes to the question that your sister asked and to your last point, Antoine, about remaining authentic. Again, an opinion, a feedback is nothing more than a person's opinion. So once you hear the person's opinion, you can hear it out to the end. Once you hear that, it's okay to remain true to your beliefs and remain in control of what your belief system is. Because as I told you, I personally didn't remain in control of my own personal belief system and my own personal gut. And I made a mistake that, you know, it cost me some things, cost me some time, cost me some heartache, cost me some pain, but it cost me some things that I could have not had to pay had I remained in control of my own belief system. Antoine, looking at data, he made some decisions where he was like, this data doesn't look like it's making sense and it's not matching up. And he decided to go counterintuitive to his gut and found out that, dang, I should have stuck with my gut. And my gut, if I understood better that belief system of why I believed the data was what it was, maybe I could have articulated that better and changed somebody else's perspective, or changed somebody else's perspective at looking at the data. So that's the third thing, is just remain in control of your belief. Also within that, use your personal insights to gauge the distance between the feedback and your veritas. Veritas is the Latin word for truth. So use what you've experienced. Use how you're communicating internally with yourself to really gauge the difference between what you're hearing in the feedback to what your actual reality is, what your actual truth or true north is. And when you're able to use that, I think that's how you'll also be able to maintain the control of your beliefs. The fourth thing is proactively seek feedback. Man, Antoine, we're kind of on some of the same points. That was your second point, is asking more feedback. Look, where I grew up at, closed mouth don't get fed. So if you don't open your mouth and say something, you're just going to be hungry. So be willing to put yourself out there and ask and seek and be the person who's asking for somebody to give you information. Be that person who is, instead of waiting for somebody to ask for permission, be that person who is giving permission. Now you do have to take that with a grain of salt in some aspects, where people say, hey man, if you see something that I'm doing wrong, go ahead and let me know. And then you say, hey, just a heads up, you did that last part a little off. And they're like, who the hell are you talking to? And now they're jumping down your throat. So there are some people who will lie to you, give you a blanket permission, and then later on come back at you and they really didn't mean blanket permission. They just said it because it sounded good. But be that person who can genuinely give that blanket permission to people you trust, to people you trust, not to everybody, but to people that you trust who are going to really have that care and compassion and know you so that they can give you feedback that is going to help move you closer to the success that you seek. And then the last tool that I came up with feedback and in regards to applying feedback was simply, it doesn't have to be an all or nothing approach. Take what is of value, take what you can learn from, take what you can apply, and then the rest doesn't have to be drank, consumed, or even written into your story. So that's what it's about, is avoid the all in or nothing approach. Use an approach that is very methodical and logical. And that's why I typically wait to look at the feedback, because I can be, like I said, I can be confrontational. I'm just being transparent. I can be confrontational. So I will have to hear feedback and sometimes keep my mouth shut and keep my ears open so that I can later on take what I heard and say, okay, now what about that can I apply? And I mean, I've had people tell me like, you're a bad guy and this, that, and the other, and all these horrible things about myself, which I already know that I'm not a bad guy. But there are some areas that I can work on, because we all have areas that we can work on. So some of these areas I'm actually aware of, and I'll hear the feedback from it, and I get frustrated because it's like, man, you're already aware of this. Why are they telling you that when you told yourself that 15 times last week and you're trying to work on it? But obviously it's a half-ass effort because it's not showing that you're working on it. So for that, it's just not taking an all or nothing approach. Be able to take time, create space, and sit back and reflect on the feedback that you're given, and then decide selectively and intelligently, not based on comfort, not based on what makes you feel good, but what is going to move you closer to your goal. If somebody says that your walk is cool, but you need to step in on what'd you say, spurs and boots and
spurs.
Boots and spurs. You need to step on boots and spurs. Then really take time with yourself and find out how much you are attached to your walk and what you want that walk to be in certain situations or in all situations. And so that's really what it comes down to. I'll really quick shoot back to the 5 tools. Are number 1, make feedback about growth. Number 2, create a safe place for people to approach you with feedback. Number 3, remain in control of your beliefs. And number 4, proactively seek feedback. And number 5, avoid an all or nothing approach. With that being said, I want to thank you guys tonight for coming on and sitting with us live in the chat. For those who are watching on the replay, thank you for getting to this point. This is like the credits. So if you made it to here, you really messed with us, and I appreciate it. But I thank you guys for tuning in tonight. Antoine, again, thank you for coming out and being a part. I know you have a very busy schedule or a very proactive schedule like I have a very proactive schedule, but you're very intentional with your time. So the fact that you're able to carve out time to rock on the first row, I'm genuinely appreciative of it, and grateful of it as well. The next time that you will see the Wednesday, or not the Wednesday word, the first row live will actually be tomorrow, February 13th. That is at 6:30 p.m. Pacific Standard Time. That will be for the Wednesday word, the weekly Wednesday word. That will be, the topic is what's the forecast? What is the forecast? If you want to know what the topic is or what I mean by that title, tune in live tomorrow at 6:30 p.m. Pacific Standard Time. I'll be happy to share what that thought is and the tools that I came up with for that. Other than that, Antoine, I just, again, want to thank you for coming out, being a part, live chat. We got a couple more things. Great show, Mr. Rowe and Antoine. From Tamara Wade. Tiffany Wade says, great show, guys. Bruce Gatewood, great show, gentlemen. It looks like we had a great show, man. That's the feedback. I mean, if anybody wants to give us, right now is the best time if you want to give us some negative feedback. pretty open right now. We can't really put it out on blast on live. So if you have some negative feedback, we're happy to hear that too. Thank you guys for the praise. We appreciate you guys for rocking with us tonight. If you have not already, please click the subscribe button to the first row. When you click the subscribe button, there will be a bell. Click that bell so you can be notified when the first row is on live. We are looking to expand our content. We have Keeping It Real Estate, the first row Intersations. We have first row panel Intersations. There's a new segment that we actually did last week called What's Going On. And there's just so much. The Wednesday word, there's a lot coming, more to come. I hope you guys are along for that ride and experience the growth that we're looking to get out there. But until the next time that we see you, thank you for sitting on the first row. I look forward to seeing you tomorrow at 6:30 p.m. Pacific Standard Time. Until the next time, one love, peace, and God bless.
Peace, guys. Thank you so much, Billy.
Peace.